I wanted to know just how bad an anime has to be to end up in the absolute bottom tier of Crunchyroll. So, I went searching for the impossible. An anime rated a flat, perfect 1 star. Surprisingly, I couldn't find any that low, but what I did find was a trio of absolute disasters sitting squarely under 2 stars. High Guardian Spice, X-Arm, and Rusted Armors. I assumed they would all fail for completely different reasons. Maybe one had a terrible story. Maybe another had awful characters. Maybe the last one was just incredibly boring. But after suffering through all 3 of them back to back, I noticed something fascinating. Despite being completely different genres, styles, and concepts, they all share the exact same cursed DNA. They broke the same fundamental rules of filmmaking, and that is exactly why they ended up in the deepest depths of the platform's trash can. The first thing all 3 of these shows struggled with wasn't lore, world building, or basic plot points. It was immersion. The exact moment an anime stops feeling believable is the moment the viewer stops caring. High Guardian Spice opted for a traditional 2D look, but the animation felt completely unfinished. The background characters were totally static, sometimes literally sliding across the screen facing the same direction, and the awkward perspectives pulled you straight out of the fantasy world. If it hadn't come out in 2021, I would have sworn it was AI generated. X-Arm took that lack of immersion and multiplied it by 10. It chose the dark path of 3D CGI, but it was executed so poorly it felt like a bone in the throat to watch. The characters looked like creepy, lifeless video game assets awkwardly dragged and dropped into a scene, completely destroying any sense of reality. Rusted Armors suffered the exact same CGI curse. It gave us stiff, plastic-looking character models that made high stakes. Emotional scenes looked completely ridiculous and unintentionally funny. 3 different styles, budgets, and studios, but the exact same result. The audience couldn't stay locked in, and once immersion dies, everything else becomes a chore to watch. The second major problem was expectation. Every single one of these titles promised something specific to the audience, and every single one failed to deliver. High Guardian Spice was heavily marketed as one of the very first flagship Crunchyroll originals. Produced by their parent company Elation rather than a seasoned Japanese studio, people expected a high-budget masterclass to kick off Crunchyroll's production era. Instead, viewers got a simplistic Western-style cartoon. Regardless of whether that style choice is inherently bad, the massive disconnect immediately alienated the core anime audience. X-Arm carried the weight of its manga readers' expectations. The original manga sits at a decent 6.35 out of 10 on my anime list, but the adaptation felt like a complete insult to the author's work. Fans expected a gritty, high-octane sci-fi thriller and received a technical train wreck. Rusted Armors had a completely unique barrier to entry. It didn't start as a manga or a light novel. It began as a 2.5D live-action stage play. The production studio, Kino Productions, tried to force the hyper-exaggerated theatrical energy of a live stage into an anime format without the budget or directing chops to make the transition work. But the absolute biggest issue, none of these shows gave the audience a good enough reason to forgive their flaws. Think about it, plenty of beloved anime have bad animation, weird pacing, or awkward dialogue, but they survive because they have an anchor, something so incredibly good that you ignore the rough edges. A mind-blowing story, deeply relatable characters, or massive emotional payoffs. This trinity had no anchor to hold on to. In High Guardian Spice, the writing felt disjointed and emotionless. Aside from a few genuinely entertaining supporting characters like Amaryllis, who in my opinion carried the show solely because she loves discord and chaos, the main journey of Rosemary and Sage lacked any real soul to keep the adventure going. With X-Arm, there is actually a pretty cool sci-fi concept on paper. A smartphone-hating kid gets hit by a truck and wakes up 16 years later as an advanced cyber weapon. But because the visuals were trying to achieve these bizarre, unearned aura farm moments, it was physically impossible to connect with the characters. Rusted Armors easily had the strongest narrative potential of the 3. A historical Sengoku period story about a hidden village of gunsmiths defending themselves against foreign conquistadors, complete with compelling character backstories and genuine zeal. But again, the plastic, rigid visuals constantly suffocated the drama. After sitting through all of them, the hierarchy of the bottom 1% becomes pretty clear. X-Arm is easily the hardest one to recommend to any human being. The CGI feels less like a finished television show and more like a technical experiment gone horribly wrong. High Guardian Spice remains the most controversial. While its rough animation and bland storytelling made it an easy target for community backlash, if you completely strip away the anime purist expectations, it's ultimately just a harmless, flawed Western fantasy show. And honestly, Rusted Armors was my personal favorite of the bunch. Not because the animation was any better, it really wasn't, but because beneath the stiff, plastic movements, you could actually see a genuinely interesting story fighting to break through the surface. If this show had received a traditional 2D style instead of that nightmarish CGI, it could have easily been a solid 7 out of 10. At the end of the day, these 3 shows didn't score under 2 stars because they are the worst stories ever written in human history. They failed because they broke the golden unwritten rule of media. If your audience can't get immersed, they will stop caring. And once a viewer stops caring, even a brilliant script doesn't stand a chance. The hardest part of this video was physically sitting through all 3 of these back to back. If you enjoyed the suffering, leave a like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments if you've ever dared to watch any of these. I'll see you guys next time.